Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge. Hello my friends, welcome to another weekly wrap-up, but not just any weekly wrap-up. We have a super-sized weekly wrap-up for you, okay? We have 15 books to talk about today. Well, let me double check. 14 books to talk about today, because one of them, I can't quite tell you what it's about, so I guess it's technically 14. But last weekend, I had an anniversary party that I had helped set up and implement for my best friend's parents. It was wonderful. They're one of the couples who has really influenced my life, so that was really amazing. And also next weekend, I will be traveling and won't be able to film a weekly wrap-up either, so we're at that time of year where I'm gone on weekends sometimes, which means that weekly wrap-ups will be extended. But have no fear, I still have 3 videos coming out next week. I'll give you a tease, because why not? I do have a trope recommendation coming, which I won't tell you what that one is, though my channel members do have early access to it right now. And they will have early access to these other videos too. There will be a Pride Rec video that's coming, and there will also be my mid-year freak out tag coming. So those 3 videos will still be going up while I'm gone. I'm not going to be completely away from my phone because, let's be honest, who is these days? But I am going to try my best. We are actually going to the far side of North Dakota and down to South Dakota. And I'm really looking forward to the trip, though road trips are not my most favorite thing to go on. I honestly would rather fly someplace or, you know, go on short road trips, but we're going to some places I've always wanted to go and seeing some family I haven't seen in a really long time. So I am looking forward to it, and I will still be reading and listening to audiobooks and hopefully still have some stuff to talk about when I get back. I will be vlogging a lot of the places that we're going for my Patreon at least. So if you're a member over there or join at the faithful follower level or above, you'll get access to those. And yeah, that's pretty much all the updates I need to give. We'll get into it because, as I said, there are 15 books to talk about this week. So, you know, we gotta get started with that. And I have a long day of filming ahead, like I said, for pre-filming everything. So, first up though, I am so excited to talk about Protected by Claire Kent. Oh my gosh, am I excited about this. So, just as a reminder to anyone who's finding this fresh off, Claire Kent / Noelle Adams is actually an author that I work for. I am a PA for her, and this was the first book that I actually took over her ARC teams for her, which was so cool. I talk about that a lot. Again, sorry to keep referencing it, but you know, my Patreon is what helps make this channel happen, so I'm not ashamed to mention it, but I just mean I share a lot more of my behind the scenes and talk a bit more in detail about things that I wouldn't just put out on my public videos. But this was the first one where I took over the ARC side of things and her permanent ARC team and everything, which is so cool. Previously, I'd mostly been doing a bit of social media stuff because she doesn't like dealing with that part of it. I mean, a lot of authors don't. And that's part of the reason why she's been writing for, we got to be getting close to 15 years for her, maybe even longer, because I know she had some pen names before I knew who she was. And she just hasn't focused on social media, right? So I've done a lot of that for her, and then reading her backlist and new releases to do content pulls. So that's mostly what I've been doing. But this is the first one I took over the ARC teams for, which was awesome. But this book is a standalone in the world. So I will give some details because this one is going to be available for direct sales on her website on June 26th, and then the next week on July 3rd, it will go into Kindle Unlimited. She's playing a bit more around for people who don't want to support Amazon but still want to read her books, making them available on her website, and it'll actually be cheaper that week than it will be when it's available on Amazon. So that's my plug for her. But now let's talk about the book, because again, if you've been around a while, part of the reason I'm so thrilled to be working for her is I've been a fan of hers for a very long time, as you'll see, all those books right there. So Protected is a standalone that is set only 2 years after Impact. Now, if you've read some of the other books, you'll know that Last Light and Haven, they're set about 4 years after Impact, and then all the books after that come later. And her new series that she started, which had Devotion in it, that's going to be set 45 years after Impact, and it's more of like, even more of like the dystopian world we're living in, right? Whereas the other books are more of like very quickly post-apocalyptic, right? Like the apocalypse has just happened, and there was an impact, right? So this one, we focus on Lila, where we start, and Lila is on her own. Her boyfriend that she had been surviving with, he died about 6 months back. So for the last 6 months, it's just been her against the world trying to survive. And she ends up coming up against this group of survivors, which I believe Logan is the name of like the leader of this group. But our hero is actually going to be Deck. And Deck is actually a nonverbal hero. He is become like selectively mute after some serious trauma. Let's just put that out there. There's some serious trauma that he's lived through, and it has made him selectively mute. Now, Lila gets offered the chance to join with them. They have very few, well, I mean, not very, very few, but they have rules for survival, but they're a group traveling together. And she really doesn't see another way to stay safe if they're willing to take her, and she gets good vibes from them. She joins in. And so this book, which it's a little bit longer than a novella, you know, it's about the length of, what did she say? Kind of the length of like Princess or some of the shorter ones in there, but it's about like 200 pages. And it follows as Lila starts to fall for Deck and the relationship that they have. And what'll be cool about this one is in the same way she did it, where like Last Light is considered a standalone, but yet it really intros you to a lot of stuff. That is how she explains that this one is, because the series that is starting next year, which is called The Wilds, the first book will be called Lost Song, and that one, she said, will take place 3 years after Impact, so that will get us closer towards the Last Light time. And in this book, we get introduced to a lot of the characters that will be. Now, I won't tell you who all of those people are because that'll be the fun of it, but one of the things I will say is that this Logan character that we meet, Noelle has told me that he will be kind of like the Mac character, okay? And if you've read the Kindle series, you know who Mac is, and that's going to be the same kind of thing with Logan. And I think she sets that up very well. Again, I'm always biased when I talk about her. It's why I don't share what my ratings are for these books, because obviously I'm going to rate them highly. This is an author that I adore and I work for her. So I'm more just here to tell you the facts and the teaser of the book than to be all like, oh, well, this one I hated and it was whatever, which I absolutely didn't hate this. I had a great time, because if you've read, I mean, even if you've only read like Last Light and like if you've read Last Light and some of those ones, you'll get some vibes. But specifically, if you have, it's weird because this one takes place beforehand, but if you've read, let's say, Homestead and Beacon, I think there are some really good setups for what's going to happen in the wilds, because we get introduced to what the wilds are in those books, and that's where these ones are going to take places. But there are some characters from Homestead that you will see, and that's all I'm going to say about that. You'll see when you get in. But I had so much fun the minute that this dropped. I put everything else aside and I just enjoyed it so much. So enough talking about that one. There is no link for a pre-order for that one yet. Once it's out, I will go back and maybe add it in here, but I'm sure I'll share it all over the place too. We will be talking about Noelle again at the end of this, because one of the other things that I can't even talk about is from her. But of course, being me, I'll still have some things to talk about. But let's move along. We got some other things to get to here. Okay, so next up, there was All My Love, which this is, yes, the third time I've read this book, which it's my own fault why I had to read it 3 times. And I don't mean this in a bad way at all, but this is one that I've annotated a few times for people. And I've shared this before. you know, I do my annotated pre-orders. I also have patrons who get an annotated book every month. And this is one that I had done before. And I just, again, it's my own fault. I didn't think anyone would pick this one again because it's just so unique and odd and also extremely like sexual that's not always the typical one people pick. Again, there's no shame to this. I'm not saying a thing about it. I just mean I only just read this one back in, I think, March. And before that, I read it last year and I needed to read it again to annotate it. And that's the reason why I say that's like my own fault is that sometimes, well, not sometimes, when I've read a book multiple times and then annotate it, number one, a lot of my thoughts, I can't remove what I know is going to happen from them. So they're definitely more like predictive annotations. But also if it's a book that I start to notice the flaws with, you know, it's not a book like, let's say, Ian Mackenzie, where I notice things I like more every time. When it's a book that was maybe a book I read because it was bonkers and it was fun, I may give that book a high rating the first time because the experience of reading it gave me this like thrill, you know, and I recommend it to all of you guys. And I'm like, this was so fun, or this book hits a bunch of kinks that I really, really love. I have better things to say about it. But like anything, when you really start to analyze it or you are pushed to reread it again, you maybe aren't looking over the flaws in the same way. So I just want to be really clear to the person that I read this for. There isn't a thing you did wrong by picking this. Okay, I want to be super clear about that. I'm just pointing out that this is now the third time that I've read it, I noticed more things that like annoy me than did the first time when I was gushing about it, right? And that is why there are often a lot of books that are my bonkers favorites that I don't read them again, right? There are ones that are 6-star reads, which are books that I by the time I recommend, like I have read them multiple times and they stand up to reading multiple times. And so every time it gets picked, I'm excited to do it, right? And then there's one where if the second time I read this, I had kept my annotations, which is what I should always do, but sometimes I get lazy and I'm like, oh, no one else will pick it, I'll just send it. And then someone else picks it and I'm like, all right, I got to read it again, right? And again, that's nobody's fault. I get paid to do this. I didn't have a problem. My point as it goes to reviewing this book, if you go back and if I remember to, I will tag it. I might not be able to find it, but my original view is still saved on my Goodreads. I just moved down the review a little bit and put other notes on top of it. So my original review for this, I gave this book 4 stars, and it is so wild. I haven't even said what this one's about, but this is a small town. It's a big age gap. Our heroine is, I think, 20, and she lives next door to this single dad who she's been obsessed with since she was 16, and he moved in next to her, 15 or 16, and she has wanted him all that time, but she knows that she was too young and she can't make a move on him. He would feel gross about it. So she bides her time, she waits, and she is a stalker. Like, this is a dark-ish romance. I put it under erotic because you'll see why. It's an erotic romance, but it is dark in that way of like, she's obsessive. This is showing what a female stalker might look like. She also loves his little boy so much. She loves his little boy, which to me is the redeeming quality of Dolly in a lot of ways, because if she showed even a hint of like jealousy of the kid or any of that, like this would be so icky, because it would be like she might hurt this child because she's obsessed with the dad, but it's not that way. She loves them both so much. And the redeeming qualities of Dolly for me are how much she loves that little boy. And specifically, there's a scene in here where she goes after a woman who is babysitting this little boy, and this woman, some of her actions lead to the child being in danger. And Dolly, who's this tiny, petite, feisty woman, is ready to kill this person for the danger they put the kid in. And like, that to me is like a huge redeeming quality of Dolly. But anyway, she's super obsessed to the point that when he leaves for work for the day, he's actually a farmer, and when he leaves for work for the day, she will sneak into his home and she will drink the dregs of his coffee. She will use his toothbrush to masturbate and then replace it with another one. She will like lie on his bed and masturbate. Like, she gets so wet for him all the time that reading that over and over and over, and now this being the third time I've read it, you were just like, girl, you need to like get checked, because you should not be this lubricated. It should not be a slip and slide all day, every day maybe you should get that checked, okay? Every time she comes, it's a squirt, which hot maybe, but also does it that all the time. And then it's just really over the top. It's supposed to be, that's what Daisy Jane does. This series specifically, the Twisted Sister series, that's what it is. They're all kind of stalkers or creepy in some way. And it's turning it on its head, right? And it's that thing where, are you okay with it when it's an obsessive guy? How do you feel about it when it's an obsessive girl? How does a guy, like how does Hudson react to having someone be obsessed with him in the way that like a woman would, right? Because at the end of the day, like Hudson still does have the control in a scenario where if it's a dark romance and the guy is the one obsessed, the woman probably doesn't really have a choice but to just get on board with it, right? Hudson, this dad, he does have the choice. So seeing why he is cool with a woman being obsessed with him, I think is what's really interesting about this book. It's what interested me the first time. And I hold on to that in this one as well, because if there was someone who was acting that way towards me and even like loving my kid, but I would just feel super uncomfortable. And like because of Hudson's past and how things went down with his son's mother, having a woman who is so completely devoted and obsessed with you, that really appeals to Hudson. So take that for what you will. So anywho, I didn't mean to talk about this one so long, but I just wanted to be clear to my lovely patron who picked this that this was absolutely a fine book to pick. I don't mean to disparage that. I just mean that for my personal reading experience, I don't want to read this one again. I've read it 3 times in 5 months, and that was too much for this one. So I made sure I kept my annotations this time. So if anybody ends up wanting to pick it, they absolutely can. I won't have to read it again. We got the annotations in. And in a way too, it makes me happy that 2 of my patrons love a twisted book like I do. You know, like that tells me I found my people. So anywho, be clear. You know who you are. It's a great book. It was just tough to read it 3 times because it has those things that when you read it for the shock value, you're like, wow, this book is crazy. And I'll continue to recommend it because it is hot. But when you're now reading it 3 times, you're like, these people need help. You know what I mean? Like you get to that spot where you're like, ugh. But the first time around, it's just like, whoa, you know? And there's a place and a time for everything, you know? Or a time and a place, I don't know. But Dolly and Hudson they're amazing. And if there is a spicy kink you like, it's probably Daisy Jane has written it. Okay, we got to keep going here. But, well, I guess the next one is pretty easy too. There was Kinley McGregor's A Pirate of Her Own. This was one of the Rake Appreciation Society books, so I won't talk very much about this one. I also do talk a bit more about this one in an upcoming video I have because it has a trope that I talk about. But we had our live show for this. I will link it up here. We talk both about A Pirate of Her Own and Mr. Impossible by Loretta Chase. Our next book club, we have announced what those books are. That's over on my Instagram. I won't talk about that yet because that'll be in another video. But this is a quarterly book club that I have with Crystal from Crystal's Bookish Life. She's my bookish big sis and dear, dear friend. And this was really cool. We ended up, these were both like adventure books. Like this one was a pirate story. And Mr. Impossible is a bit of The Mummy, like with Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz. Like that is the vibe of that book. And they were both really fun. This book, again, you can go watch our talk about it. I know a lot of people in book club did not care for this one. And I'll just tell you, like, it wasn't my favorite thing. So if you want to hear us rant about this book, go check it out over there. Okay, next up, there was Change of Heart by Hannah Bailey. So this was a very anticipated read of mine. This is book 3 in the Wells Ranch series. And this one is about Denver, who is Austin's younger brother. And it is about Blair. And this is a book that, I mean, I want to be like, I felt very conflicted, but also like I didn't, because I'm very firm on like what I ended up feeling for this book. So I'm not conflicted. I'm confident about what it is, but I'm conflicted in the way of like, there were beautiful parts in this. I just think this book was balanced poorly. And then there's a part of it where just, I don't care for some of the things in here. And there's nothing wrong with that because it's me. At the end of the day, I can do what I want. So let's get into it. Why I didn't care for this one. And she's actually back in town because her mother has Alzheimer's and she's back to like help her dad with that. And this is a book told in 2 timelines. And I straight up want to say it's like told in 2 timelines more than just being like a flashback, okay? Because it very clearly is following how these two first became best friends, how they started to be attracted to each other, how they fell in love, how they planned to be together, and how that went wrong. At the same time as having Blair be back in town, and Denver decides, this is my chance to get the love of my life back. It's been how many years? 15 years, 10 years? I think it's been like 15. I didn't write, but it's been a very long time. And he's like, this is my chance. I'm getting her back. And he's been known as a playboy lately and a sleep around. He's even kind of seeing someone when she comes back into town. He drops that person like a hot potato and he's like, you're the one for me. So we have those aspects being laid out. Then we flash back. Now, for a moment too, it's been a while since I read Alive and Wells, though that is my favorite book in the series, right? Having been 3 of them that came out. And that one, Austin, the older brother of Denver, is the one who like had to take over the farm because the dad just ghosted them. Now the dad's not dead. The Wells father isn't dead, but when their mom died of cancer years ago, the dad just checked out and left Austin in charge, left the younger sibling, all of it, and just checked out of everything. Now, both Austin and Denver were like 18 when the mom died. And they were still like, I think the younger sister and a younger brother. I can't remember how many siblings are in this family, but I know there was another like kid younger than Denver, but the dad just ghosted. And so a lot of Austin's book is about how he dealt with that and how it made him the grump that he is and all of his story we have going on right over there. And in this one, we get to see through these flashbacks, like what that was like on Denver. Okay. And I don't want to do everything, but again, these two, like they've been neighbors and friends for so long. We see them as friends when they're kids and just how much they genuinely love each other. And then we see when they're like 15, 16, how that moves into sexual attraction. And we see them like they're each other's first and they're just together and in love. And then we learn about the mom becoming sick and all that. So again, that's all happening in that timeline. And then in the real one, we see now Blair's the one dealing with a sick parent. And we see the things that Denver's trying to do to win her back over. But we're told that he really did something that messed up. Now, it's hinted that it was maybe they both did something. But to me, what I pulled from it is that Denver was the one having to make up for what happened. That he needs to grovel. He needs to make right. That's what I was taking from it. Now, not everyone else might be taking it that way based on some of the reviews. But for me, that's how I was taking it, is that he was the one. We're told that like he's been the playboy, that he didn't like wait around for her. So she's like, how could I trust you? I've heard you slept with all these people and like blah, blah, blah. There was a friend of mine that you ended up fooling around with. And we're just told all these things he's done. But as the things start to become clear to us and we find out what Denver was going through and then something that happened between Blair and him, to me his reaction is at least partly understandable. Like, I'm not saying that what he did was great, but what Blair did, or more how she reacted, I just think they were both 18 and they both acted impulsively and hurt each other, and it's a big hurt. And so how he reacted by filling the void with other women, they were broken up, he's heartbroken, and her going about her career saying like, I would have had to quit my career to do that. Maybe you're able to guess what I mean. But also his mom had just died. His dad had just abandoned him. This is his best friend and his woman and the person he thought he'd be with forever. And then this thing happens. And so they both were at a place that it was a turning point, and they both weren't there for each other, but for different things. And my whole point of all of this, of why it was an issue, is that when we're having that first part of the book, right, where they're in present time, not in the flashbacks, in present time, Denver is made out to completely be the villain all the way through. Now, I don't think Blair's a villain either. I don't think we should have been labeling her as, I don't think we needed to label it that way either. The point was, the way this felt is that he needed to grovel, and there was all this stuff he had to fix for what he did, and I just didn't see it that way, and I felt like the author was pushing me to have to feel that way. Because they do talk about this now, and he acknowledges to her, like, I did want to talk about it. I acknowledge that it was your choice. I just wanted to talk. And she does say, she's like, you're right. I could have waited another day for us to talk. But I just want to be clear that I didn't appreciate the author really dumping on Denver for the first half of this, where I was enjoying his grovel because I didn't know what he was groveling for. I just don't feel like this should have been a grovel one. I feel like it should have been these two people healing for what they went through as kids and being able to be there for one another. Because to me, that was needed. And I think that they can't undo what happened. They maybe wouldn't undo what happened, but they could have changed how they, they could have worked through it differently. So again, I didn't mean to go full into this one, but I gave this one 3 stars, and I don't usually do that for an arc. Like, I'm just telling you, I gave this 3 stars because to me, I just didn't appreciate him being made a villain. And again, villain is strong, but like made to be the one who has to fix it is my point. I think that these two have a very special relationship, and just as much as he should have been there when she did that to support her, she should have let him talk it through with her first, because then I think he would have been there, right? And that's the part where I get that's what the author was doing, because they were 18. They weren't ready for this. That probably was the right decision that she wanted, but that doesn't mean I have to be like, she did it all right, So that was a 3-star one for me. I didn't appreciate him being made a villain. Okay, moving along. Chosen by a Beast by Miranda Bridges. This is another book that I annotated for pre-order, and I had never heard of this author before. But this is a kind of like sci-fi gargoyle type romance. They're like a sci-fi gargoyle, basically. And the thing, though, that me and my patron discovered is that she actually meant to recommend a different book from this author. But I had already bought this one and started doing it. Because this is a spin-off of another series. And in my opinion, though, an author who's starting a spin-off series needs to explain stuff more, because I shouldn't have had to be that confused. I was going to be confused on previous characters, because that happens, but she didn't re-explain like where we are or why this heroine was kidnapped and why she's being married off to an alien to have babies. Like, we didn't explain any of that. And it's a start of a new series. It's listed as book 1, right? So I can't, and when I looked at the reviews, I definitely wasn't the only one. And again, I don't blame my person for this. They can pick whatever book they want for me. I can still look at this book and be like, this author didn't do a great job. Now, if I'd read book 6 in an alien series and I'm confused, well, come on. I should have started with book 1. But this is book 1. And I didn't understand any of what was going on. So I'm not going to go into all of that with it, because I'd probably do it wrong. But the main tropes of this one is that it is these aliens need to breed with humans to continue their line. They are this type of alien that is like, they have a heart of stone, okay? So they don't have a heartbeat. But when they mate with their fated mate, literally the stone breaks off of their heart and their heart starts beating. And I did love that. I really enjoyed that about it. That was great. But it was just hard to get a feel for the characters. This is only 140 pages. And again, without some of the backstory, it was tough. But we have Michaela. She ends up, her mate that she ends up with is actually the king of this group of people. There is kind of a fake, there's a fake language barrier at the beginning, which I won't fully explain, but let's just say only one person isn't able to understand the other person. And it is a bit of a subterfuge. That is why that happens. He needs an heir. They need a baby. He has alien cock that is described as being as big as a forearm. That's always a great way to explain it. And yeah, like this was fun. It was only 145 pages. I gave it 3.5 stars. I would read another book by this author. I'd be interested, like I said, to go to the beginning of the world. But I'm just saying, when you start a new series, that sure, inside it lists the author has other books, but if it's that connected to the previous series, why didn't you just label it book like 8 or 9 then? Why did you label it as book 1 if you're not going to explain the lead up to it? And so I think that's a fair criticism no matter what, you know? Okay, next up, there was Delay of Game by Maggie Rodden. And this was another one, of course, that I was annotating for a patron. And this, I didn't write what series this one was a part of, but this is a part of one of the other football series. Like, she writes a lot of football. Let's just be real here. I think does she have a hockey series too? I don't think she does. Let me check this out. Hold on. Forgot what series it was. Okay, this one was book 2 in Plays and Penalties. So this one was not my favorite Maggie Rodden, let's just say. And that's mostly because of kind of the miscommunications and the tropes chosen for this one. Though it looks like I did end up giving it a 4, but it's one that as I thought about it, it's kind of bugged me. But this one is about Liv and Liam. And at the beginning of this book, Liv is fooling around with her boyfriend. Hasn't been her boyfriend for long, maybe like a month to 6 weeks. And she accidentally says her best friend's name when her boyfriend is about to go down on her. So that's a mood killer. And she actually ends up getting like kicked out. Now he doesn't kick her out and like get the fuck out, but he's like, really? Really? Because he has always been told like, oh, don't be worried about that guy. That's my best friend. And then she just said her best friend's name while he was trying to go down on her. So not her finest moment. Okay. Like I understand why her boyfriend was like, I think you need to leave. So she leaves and she ends up like, she is into her best friend. He's into her. He's a playboy. This one does take place in college. I think their senior year of college. They've been best friends actually since they were young. And their history is, and this is interesting, she was actually dating his now again, they've like all been friends. But she was actually dating his best friend the summer between high school and college. And that her boyfriend, her high school boyfriend, he was on a European trip, a backpacking trip with other friends. And so her and Liam were spending a lot of time together that summer. And they actually they didn't, but they were feeling things for each other. And I believe in Liv's mind, she was kind of like, wanted something to happen, but was like, I need to wait until my boyfriend gets back to break up with him if there's going to be anything with Liam. But this boyfriend dies on this trip. He dies on this trip. And so anything that was going to happen between them is pretty much ruined because how can they do that? But they still end up going to the same college. And now Liam feels like super protective over her too. But he also feels like he can't ever make a move on her because this was his dead friend's girl and he's got to look out for her. So they are friends, but he also has scared a lot of guys away. And she is into him. She wants to be with him. And so she does the thing that always makes me roll my eyes and immediately makes the book feel juvenile, is she asks him to teach her to be able to date other guys and to help her get sexual experience. But she even knows that she really wants him to see how good they could be to each other. So she's tricking him into basically having sex with her for other men, which doesn't make sense anyway. While trying to get him to fall for her. So it was a mess from the start. This was never going to go well for them. So they were just kind of annoying. And the whole thing felt pretty juvenile. But this was football. Yeah, this was football. And it was okay. They did do some fun, kinky things. They used restraints. There was a bit of almost exhibitionism. Like they had sex in a closet at a party, knowing people could like hear them. So semi-public things going on. There's a trigger warning for a sports injury. So I gave this one 4, but honestly, it's probably a 3.5 or less just because you know, and then there had to be like this third act breakup, which wasn't a breakup because they aren't together. And they just, again, they all felt very childish. And I was like, no, we don't need this. Okay, we got to keep moving along because we got a lot of books. There was Bourbon and Proof just came out last week. And this is book 3 and the final book in The Bourbon Boys by Victoria Wilder. I had to order my copy right away, and I'm so glad I just got here last night before this. And it's going to be so fun. But this one is about Ace and Hadley. Okay, so we're back in Fiasco, Texas, and we have the Fox brothers, the Bourbon Boys here, and we have Hadley Fitch, who is actually Lincoln's best friend. So it's a brother's best friend, but like it's a girl. The girl is Lincoln's best friend. And Ace and Hadley have been hot for each other forever. And Ace has actually done a lot of things to protect Hadley from her father and his machinations to marry her off for things, because she is from a very wealthy dad, but her dad is currently on house arrest before being tried for a crime that he's committed, and Hadley is actually the one who's now in control of all of his money, and so he and other people are basically harassing her for that money. Now, Ace, he is involved with a few shady things, which we've had some hints at in previous books. But he is definitely a stern brunch daddy. He is also a kinky bastard, we'll just say that. And he is obsessed with Hadley, but he's kept her at arm's length, not only because he thinks he's too broken for her, all that blah, blah, but also because of a threat from Hadley's dad. But we come to a point in their lives where Ace's dad, is it the dad or is it the grandpa? Actually, no, I'm not sure. It might be the grandpa. Blah, 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 blah. Let me see if it says. It might be the granddad. I don't remember. It might be the granddad. But basically there is a clause that only the married sons will get a part of the business. Okay. Which means, you know, Lincoln and the other brother will, but Ace won't. And Ace is the one who actually puts the most into it. Now, it's pretty clear for everybody else that the parental figure, I'm just going to say parental figure because, again, I can't remember if he's the granddad or the dad. Whatever. I think that he knows who Ace would marry if he was forced to marry someone, and he wants him to marry Hadley, and so he's trying to push him into it. And Hadley also could use the protection of being married to Ace to, you know, kind of keep her a bit protected from her dad. So this ends up becoming a marriage of convenience, but Hadley's determined that, like, oh, we're going to be more than that. And Ace is like, no, I'm going to keep her protected from me. But now they're living together and they're in the same place, and she is not going to go easy on daddy. Okay, she is not going to go easy on him. So this was great. There, of course, is some suspense in here. I think that this one is the best, like, planned and put together of all of them. The suspense part of it makes the most sense as well, just given her dad and some corruptness in the small town. And we also get introduced to some characters who will be in the next series, which will be called the Whiskey Women. And so we definitely get introduced to some of them. We also get introduced to a sex club, which I hope we will go to again. They actually go for their honeymoon to this place that has this sex club, and they get to try some things out. And it actually gives Hadley the idea to start one back at home as well, which is really cool. So yeah, I love this couple. I really love this whole series. This has been such a good one. And yeah, I can't wait to see what Victoria Wilder does next. I gave this 5 stars, by the way. Let me get back to rating some stuff. I gave this 5 stars. It was a 4 on the spice scale. And they did some breath plays, a bit of daddy kink. There was some restraint. There was a bit of exhibitionism at this club. And then we did have trigger warnings for blackmail, gaslighting, parental abuse, parental neglect, and violence, and kidnapping. So all of those fun things, because there is some suspense in these. Okay, next there was Come Back to Me by G.A. Mazurk, which is also Serena Ackroyd. And this one I struggled with a lot. honestly, I don't even want to go into explaining all this one, okay? If you watch my recent releases wrap up, I talk about it more in there, but I'm exhausted with how long that book was, and I'm exhausted to even talk about it when we're already almost an hour in, okay? I was excited for this. I did love the first book in the 7 Seas, but already she can't help herself but to pull in 50 million different people and plots into this book. I liked the 7 Seas. I liked getting introduced to the characters there. I didn't mind the small connections to previous worlds. But in this one, we have a whole other side suspense plot that doesn't really have to do with this couple, right? Whereas in the first one, the suspense like had to do with their dad and had to do with that couple was involved in it. And in this one, because Colt is he's a marshal, like he's a cop in there. This takes place in Canada, so different types. He's an ex-military guy, and now he is a marshal. Also, I listened to this on audio. I had an ALC from Must Love Audio. This is Connor Craze and Stella Hunter. And they were pen pals while he was in the military, but they didn't know who each other are. Then he was injured, and so he wrote her a Dear John letter, only didn't get delivered to her until much later, and he already was kind of like over feeling sorry for himself, and I know that sounds weird, but like he was feeling really sorry for himself and broken after his injury, which of course he would. So he wrote her a Dear John letter in a fit of like anxiety and like self-depression. And when he finds out that the woman he's been writing to, because he's able to figure it out once he's back in town, and she's actually best friends of his brother's wife, he is like, oh my gosh, she's amazing. And so, yeah, they were pen pals. He had broke up with her, but he was really into her, but he felt like he was too broken. But now they live in the same place, blah, 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 blah. See all the steps. Then there's also trouble happening with the local biker gang and what they are forcing a young woman to do. There's some drug trafficking going on. So that's a side story there. And then there's just this slow back and forth between them, okay? This book, you guys, was 623 pages long. The audiobook was like 15 hours long, and it was just bloated as fuck. Like, let me just tell you, this was 200 pages too long, okay? Easily. And I know I'm just so bitchy. I need to stop reading her. I said that before I tried 7 Seas, and then I was like, oh, cowboy romance, let me try it. And I tried it, and even though she's put this under G.A. Mazurk, it's still bloated. Now, the positive is we don't have a bunch of POVs, but like we might as well. For how much other characters have to do with the story, for how much side stuff we do, it's annoying, okay? I'm sorry, I'm bitching, but I'm doing it, okay? I'm annoyed with how much we do that. I don't think it's necessary to show that much of the side characters. If those characters are going to get a book, put it in their book, okay? And again, in the first one, that didn't matter so much because the hero was involved with a lot of stuff going on in his family, and we were setting up the characters. And then in this one, there's so many scenes we don't need. Like, we just don't need all of these little things. Now, do they maybe make it richer for some people? Yes. If I know how it is, okay, to read a book that's bloated with stuff. I'm pointing to Outlander, okay? I understand. I read books that are bloated with stuff, okay? I understand it. However, when the sole focus is supposed to be this is a romance novel, this is a historical fiction with a strong romance I love. Sorry, I'm comparing stuff to Outlander, okay? I'm not trying to say that. But there's a difference in genre and tone and what it's doing. And when you're writing a romance, but you spend so much page time with other characters, it's a drag. Okay, moving on. We got so much more to talk about still. Like, geez, we're just over halfway through. But I did like this couple, and this was okay, but I gave this one 3.5 stars, and I rounded up for the arc. But I was so bored by the end, I skimmed through a lot. I didn't care about the suspense plot because it wasn't central to these two, okay? That's the difference between like Bourbon and Proof, where the suspense is about those two. So anytime that Ace is dealing with some of the suspense stuff, it's directly endangering Hadley. So it makes sense that he's dealing with it. In Come Back to Me, he's dealing with other cases and stuff in town. Now they end up getting pulled into them because of what his job is, but they don't have to do with him. They have to do with other characters. And I don't think it was necessary. So that's my final word on that. 3.5 stars. There is trigger warning for drug abuse and drug trafficking, kids being brought into that situation. One of the side things is there's a kid being forced to like be a drug dealer who doesn't want to and stuff. There's death and grief and violence. And yeah, 200 pages too long. Easy for me, in my opinion. Okay, next up will be quick because it was a DNF. I DNF'd Caught Up by Nevessa Allen. Now, I don't have super poor things to say about this one. I promise. I didn't rate this one. It was a DNF. And I DNF'd at about 30 pages, right? That's usually sooner than I DNF. There's a couple of reasons. One, I hadn't been in the mood to read this up until, and then it was like coming out. And so I was going to give it like 50 to 100 pages to see if it hooked me. Because Lights Out, which I did enjoy, was not the phenomenon for me that it was for other people, you know? However, things that I think is similar about, let's say, Lights Out and Caught Up, as is with like Butcher and Blackbird, and then the second book in that series, my personal view, I think the author had a really fire idea for book 1, but then what? Publishers want trilogies, so you make a trilogy. Readers want more than one book. In the same way for me, I didn't care for book 2 in that series. I was not hooked by either of these characters, okay? I just wasn't. And when I looked up some reviews about what the story arc was going to be, I just dropped out. There were things that were interesting to me, like the heroine is a sex worker, very sex positive. She does almost like an OnlyFans thing, which again, kind of similar to like, you know, that seems to be what the theme of the series is going to be, is sex workers. There is also... and then this is supposed to be a second chance romance. It's also the stalker. This one's supposed to be kind of connected with the mafia, but a lot of people were saying like, why even make it connected to the mafia? It was lame. Our hero isn't really someone super high up in it, so he's just a random like member, which is what I was getting from the review. I don't know. But I mean, I was interested in the sex work, but then again, some of the stuff I read about how it was going to play out, I was like, you know, I didn't want to have another change of heart thing where if a thing doesn't have what I want in it, like I tend to stay away. Like that's the whole thing about, we're not bringing it back up again, but I wouldn't have read Change of Heart if I'd understood what one of those trigger warnings fully represented. That's a risk. Even with trigger warnings, you don't know what a thing's going to be. But this one, there's some good. There's a lot people will like. This will be a great read for Pride Month. There is a non-binary character in here. It's very sex positive. It's very, like, live as who you want to live. Like, those are all beautiful things. Anyway, I think a lot of people are going to love it. The cover is really cool. I also heard someone say the guy owns a bike. He wasn't a biker, but that was with him. So, but I DNF, so I don't know whether that held true or if it was more subtle as we went, but I just bowed out because I was like, you know what? I had already read Change of Heart recently and I didn't want to keep going with that. Okay, then there was Tell Me All Your Lies by Angel Anders, and this was the 4th book in Love in the Carolinas. These are supposed to be kind of slightly forbidden books. Now, I did put this one as a dark romance because it is like an undercover spy and they're trying to infiltrate the mafia. So they're not in the mafia, but I wouldn't say that their relationship was dark. Okay, the content of this one might be dark, but their relationship wasn't that dark. So, but this one is a dad's best friend, but there's only 13-year age difference because she's 36 and he is 49. Okay, so definitely he's not old enough to be her dad, but he's her dad's best friend. And they actually both are spies. I didn't realize that that could be a full-on profession where multiple people knew each other. But I guess they did run into each other on jobs before, and then they knew who each other was. And now they're kind of like competing spies. And for a certain job, this job needs like a married couple to infiltrate this mafia to try to take down this criminal entity called the Marlin. Okay. And now Grant, our hero, has actually done a job where he saved a guy who's a part of this mafia organization. So that's going to be kind of like their in. But yeah, they go undercover as kind of like a Mr. and Mrs. Smith type of thing. But before they do actually get married because they're like, we want a real paper trail. This needs to look like we're truly newlyweds. So they get married for this. And something I did really like is when they do their vows, like before they go and like get the ceremony done, they actually say these other vows that are like, I know we're not going to say traditional vows, but he's like, I promise you that I will protect you on this mission. I will have your back. You can trust me. And I really like that because instead of, you know, they're trying to make, it's like a fake marriage, but they're like, I still will be devoted to you for things and you can count on me. And I like that. So yeah, this is them undercover and then them actually finally like admitting fully their feelings and, you know, starting to mess around with each other, which is really a fun time. So in this one though, we had a bit of praise and degradation and a little bit of exhibitionism that is actually coupled with the trigger warning because there is a scene of like torture and violence and that involves them kind of torturing a guy with watching them fuck in front of him. So I guess they're torturing him with an erection or whatever. You know, so, no, I'm just kidding. It's more than that. But I gave this one 4 stars. It was a 3.5 on the spice scale. And all of the books in that series, you really can read them as standalones, right? I always say that. There's one that is a brother's best friend. There's one that is an ex-boyfriend's dad. There's one that's a priest and parishioner romance. And then this one is a dad's best friend. They're all just barely connected. One of each of the characters is friends with each other. And like they're from the Carolinas because that's what it's called. But you can read any one of those that interest you. Okay, next up was Nile by Melanie Moreland. Now, this comes out on the 22nd, and this is the second half of the duet. The first half was Finn, and then this is Nile. And I was so excited. I got another audiobook. This one is narrated by John Lane and Maxine Mitchell. And the book isn't too long. It's only about 240 pages. The audiobook was only like 6 hours. Like, it's really quick. And this one, if you read Finn, you know exactly who Nile is going to be with. You know all of the lead up to it. So I don't want to spoil Finn. But in vague terms, we have a traumatized heroine. Nile helps rescue her. And then she becomes attached to him and he doesn't want to send her away. So he ends up as kind of like her protector and then eventually they fall in love. Nile doesn't think that he can have a woman. And so he's like, well, we can sleep together, but it's just going to be for now. And the whole conflict is him kind of resisting being in love. And then we have an external third act conflict for it. So did not like this one as much as Finn, probably because it was... So, like, I would kind of compare Nile's book to, like, Aldo's book, if you've read Aldo and Roman. And I would compare kind of, like, Finn and Roman's books kind of together, which maybe makes sense because Roman is the head of his organization of the Italians, and Finn is the head of the Irish contingency of this. We do, again, see some cameos of Roman and the family in this one, which was good. But, yeah, it was all right. I gave it 4 because it was still sweet. And I stand by that Melanie Moreland's Mafia books are Mafia light. That doesn't mean they don't still hit on some heavy topics, but, like, the relationships between the couples are, like, very sweet in general. Like, a lot of her relationship in books are very sweet. And that one was one for sure. So, that one's coming out soon. Very quick Mafia duet if you're interested. Next up, there was Viper by Genevieve Evans. Okay, now, I want to be a bit careful about this one, but I'm still going to be very honest, okay? So how I'm going to be careful about this. So this book was chosen for one of my annotated pre-orders, which I know I talk about now and then, but every 2 to 3 months I do an annotated pre-order to help with my tax expenses, okay? Because my taxes are about $4,000 to $5,000 a year for this job that I do from home, right? And so I do these little fundraisers when there is my quarterly tax payments due to help with it, which there is one on Monday, actually. So but I do these. And Viper was the last one I had left from like the previous one. And people can pick either from a selection of books that I've already like have annotated before, or they can pick a custom option, which I do get to approve the book because like if they request it, I can say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to take your money for that one because I'm not going to do it. Anyway, I don't need to go into detail about that. But the point is they can choose a custom option. And sometimes that's a book that I have read before, but it wasn't one of the like offered options. Or they can pick any book they want. I just have to see generally what it's about first. And then I will send them the invoice and I'll buy the book and we'll do it. Okay. So someone who picked this book, if you are watching this, A, your book is on the way to you. And B, maybe you won't want to watch this review because I didn't care for the book. When I did the annotations and I don't care for a book, I don't just like hate on the book. Because nobody wants to get a book, especially when they've paid for it, and have someone just ripping it apart, right? So I didn't do that in the book. I more so made kind of like light of some of the things happening, and I told a few like jokes throughout it, and I also highlighted some lines I thought were really funny, and there were a few bright spots in it, okay? But overall, I did not enjoy this book. So as a reviewer on this channel, I'm going to tell you how I felt. So you out there, if you picked this one, your book is on the way to you. I hope you enjoy it and some of my more out there thoughts I had while reading it. Because as I annotate things, it's usually how I explain it is it would be like reading a book with me. That's how I annotate. I'm not looking for really any certain things. I'm just highlighting certain things and then like laughing at it. Or sometimes I use annotation stickers that have funny sayings in it. I'll also, if it's one of my like 6-star reads, I'll highlight all my favorite passages. But when I'm reading a book for the first time, it's really just me reacting to what's happening. And then when I send that to the person and they reread it, they get my reactions, what I felt, right? So I'm not like hating on the book as I'm reading through it because I don't know where the book is going. But if you were the one who picked this for me, you might want to step out now until I talk about the last book because I didn't care for this and I got to be honest about it. So with that out there, much love to the person who supported me and bought this book, but my opinions aren't bought. Just my writing in the book is bought. Does that make sense? That's how I explain it to people. Like, I'm never going to lie about how I'm feeling while I'm reading it because why would anyone trust me or like want to invest in my business if I lied? But I mean, I'm also not going to be cruel to a book that I'm reading, right? Because I can do both. I can do both. There's that thing of like a true wordsmith can like insult you without you even knowing. No, I mean, you'll probably know. And probably it will still sting. There's no way around that. But enough leading up to it, okay? I read Viper by Jennifer Evans, and here we go. I'm going to say it. This is probably the worst book I've read this year. I gave this one 2 stars, and I probably should have given it less. I mean, not that between a 2 and a 1 still sucks, but it is bad on multiple levels, okay? Multiple levels. Though when you go look at this book, you'll see it does have a pretty high rating. And again, y'all know that is not a track that I go down. I'm not here. I'm not the editor. I'm not doing that. Even when I beta read, I'm not someone who's I'm not here to nitpick that. This was a poorly written book. And it also didn't make sense. So, man, I didn't want to go into full, but like, I just have to share about this. So this is a poly relationship. It is a biker. And when the book starts with our prologue, it is in 2018, and he is like 62 years old, 61, 62 years old. And he's reflecting on his life and how he came to be with the Angels MC, which is what this series will be about, is the Angels MC. And he tells us in his prologue that he has 2 old ladies and he has many children with them, and he's looking back at how blessed he is and how thankful he is to his, they'll be hard to keep them apart, but Mia was his first wife. Man, I'm going to sound like I'm talking about sister wives, but that's kind of what this is. And then Jenny, I'm not sure, I think it's Jeannie, how he's so thankful that Mia forced him to bring Jeannie into their marriage, into their life, so that there was 3. And he's just so thankful that that happened because he would have missed out on all these beautiful things. And he's been with these women for 40 years. Okay, so in 2018, he's in his 60s. He's been with these ladies for 40 years. Okay, now we reflect back to 1998. So 20 years before the start of the book, we have this day in like January 1998. And most of the book in this time will be in that time, because what's happening in January of I'm going to keep on saying, what's happening in January of 1998 is that Viper and his family are trying to leave the like Devil's MC, I think is what it's called, or hell, I don't remember what that one's called, but they're trying to leave an MC that they're currently in because it's bad. And his sons, who are like of grown age at this point too, have discovered this Angel's MC, and they're trying to extract themselves from this MC, which Viper is the VP of, and his father was the VP of, and go to the Angel's MC. And so that's what's happening in like the kind of present time in this book, because we see him in 2018 at the beginning and the end, but like the main timeline is supposed to be the 1998. But then we flash back to even earlier, because even in 1998, he's been with his old ladies for 20 years already. Okay. So I was like, just right off the bat, I was like, where's the romance in this going to be then? Because he's been with the ladies 40 years, which is beautiful. Like, they've been together 40 years, the 3 of them in this triad. That's amazing. But then we go back 20 years and they're still already together. And then when we flash back even more, we flash back to different times. So there are so many different times in here. We switch mid-chapter, we switch POVs mid-chapter. There was no, like, was making, this is a lot of what my annotations were. It was notes just about where time we were at. Okay. So in the 1998, there's a lot happening there. We can't go over the whole thing. I don't mean to do a full thing. I'm sorry. I have to dissect this just a little bit because it was so we have all those different timelines going on, which is what's wrong. And when we flash back, when we're in 1998, when we flash back further, I know I'm using my hands to show this like timeline. We're seeing what it was like when he was a kid in the MC, what his father and mother dealt with in the MC, how he became the VP of the MC, how he fell in love with Mia, and then how Jeannie ended up in their relationship too. Because Jeannie was originally she wasn't the old lady. She was like being forced to be the club whore to who would become the VP. Or I mean the president. And she had already had like a kid with him. She had been like raped by him, was being abused, and Mia was Jeannie's best friend. And so because Jeannie was not officially the old lady of the guy who was abusing her, she was just a side piece, Mia begged him to take Jeannie too. Make her your old lady too, because then she'll be protected and we'll take care of her. Now, initially, Viper was like, no, that's no. And also, I'm in love with you. And she's like, I think kind of at first it was like, we don't have to be sleeping with her. Like, just take her as it. But very quickly, like, we know that all 3 of these people have sex together and they've been in love with each other for years and years. So we know that it's going to get to that point. But Viper was convinced to take Jeannie in. And then also one of her sons with the bad guy, comes with them and becomes the adopted son. And one of the sons kind of stays with his dad and is like that. So see how complicated this is? And the issue, and I'll move on because again, I don't want to, because that isn't my only problem, right? I also said this book was poorly written, and I wasn't talking about the timelines. I'm talking about on a sentence structure level. This is horribly written. It is written so that every single thing he does is explained. It is written in kind of a weird tense sometimes. It is written without contractions at all. So even for bikers too, there wasn't a ton of slang being used. And when there was, it was odd. So by what I mean is that there's no can't, don't, won't, shouldn't, can't, like, it's like will not, cannot, do not, almost like this formal speech, but they're bikers. And even in his head, weird. And then also every little thing is explained. Like, example, not exactly from this book, but an example of it. Viper goes into the bathroom. He goes up to the urinal. He unbuckles his belt, undoes his pants. He pisses. He shakes his dick. Then he zips up his pants, puts on his buckle, walks to the sink, turns on the water, gets soap, washes his hands, dries his hands, looks at himself in the mirror. You see what I mean? Every little detail is explained in like everything that he does. That is just, what are you doing? Are you trying to hit a word count? Like, is that it? Because it feels like you want a certain amount of words in here. I don't know, for Kindle Unlimited page reads or something. I don't know, but it was ridiculous. So it's horribly written that way. This didn't feel like a romance to me because the plot of the book was not him falling for both of the women. Because even with these flashbacks to him like taking Jeannie in, like he will reference conversations they've had, which I'm like, well, why didn't you show us this conversation? You're already jumping back in time. But when he's in 1998, he'll say, I was really put off at first when Mia asked me if I wanted to also sleep with Jeannie, or I was sleeping with them separately, and then I was sleeping with them together, and he's referencing doing that, but we don't see any of it. So what was the plot of this book, you guys? Like, he's telling the story of how happy he is to be with the Angels MC, because again, we will get to, like, I'm not going to get to it, but in the story, it gets to the point where they're able to join the Angels MC. And then from what I gather, the rest of this series is about members of the Angels MC as we get introduced to those people in here. But this book was not a romance. There was sex in it. There was sex scenes with each of the women. There was sex scenes where he's on the phone and they're having sex and he's listening. There was sex scenes with all three of them together and they interact. But then there is a scene that is referenced by Mia, which, by the way, for the most part, the women only got POVs when they were being fucked or fucking. Just saying that. There was only, I believe, 1 or 2 POVs of Mia and Jeannie when they weren't being fucked or fucking or thinking of fucking someone. So that's a way to use a woman in a book. Just saying. Have her only there to be holes for each other. Also, Viper talked constantly about how his women made him hard at inappropriate times. He talks in front of his kids how his women make him hard at inappropriate times. Their mothers talking about like, I got a stiffy for him. You guys better go so I can fuck your moms. Like, seriously? Seriously. Okay. There is mention of miscarriage in here, which there's trigger warnings for these things. All the trigger warnings were mentioned. That's great. Good. That's maybe got you one of my stars that I gave for these two. And they're just, there was a scene that we flash back to how Mia at one point shares with Jeannie that part of the reason why she wasn't worried about Jeannie coming into their marriage is that she realized pretty much immediately that she loved Jeannie and was in love with her. And Jeannie shares, I love you as my friend, and Mia's like, it's okay. I'm all right with that. Like, you're in our marriage and we love you and I wanted you to be safe. And I'm happy to share my husband with you because I love you. I'm in love with you. And Jeannie's just like, okay, that's great to hear. But then why have we had scenes of them happily fucking each other? So it just broke. Like, what was this? This wasn't a romance. I was like, okay, were you going to show Mia and Jeannie falling in love then? Are you going to show how Viper came to be in love with these two women? No, we see sex scenes with them. We hear him reference how he loves them both, how well they get him off all the time. And then we have Mia admitting that she's in love with her best friend and sister wife and her being like, no, but we know that they fuck each other without Viper there. So this isn't a FMF. Because they'll fuck when he's not there. But Jeannie's not in love with her? And they've been together for 20 years? It makes no sense. Again, I'm not saying that can't happen. But they're not sister wives who keep their households separate. Like, they all fuck together. And there's Viper talking about how they used to have nights on their own, but they would miss each other. So they'd all want to be together. All fucking each other together. And I'm like, what's the point? I'm going to stop referencing it. So that's what I mean when I say this was horribly written. All the way down to sentence level. The story made no sense. The timeline makes no sense. It wasn't a romance. So I wasn't left with much at the end. And I think, again, where my 2 stars came from is that I was trying desperately to find the good parts. Because, again, I annotated this for someone and I wasn't going to DNF it. So I did notice some nice things. As I said, I found Viper, Viper is extremely loving man and almost gentle in a way. There is a part of this where like he easily takes in his enemy's child. He loves the children he has with both the women so much. And again, and the adopted son of his enemy too. He's so tender about, again, there's miscarriages that happen in here. He's very tender towards his ladies for that. Though I will say they miscarried at exactly the same time and then get pregnant with twins at the same time when they're 41. Okay. Just putting that out there. That happened near the very end of the book before we skip back to 2018. So they literally double the amount of children that they have. They're pregnant they get pregnant the same day. Because of course their cycles are synced because they've been together for 20 years and he fucked them both the same day and they're pregnant with twins the same day. Okay. Wow. His like 40-year-old sperm was working it with his ladies. Okay. That they like double the amount of children they had in one go. It just was ridiculous. But again, I was looking for the sweet stuff and like, despite the writing being bad, like they were like good characters as in they have heart, not that they were good written. So I'm gonna move on. I spent a half hour on that. I really didn't need to, but not a half hour, like 20 minutes on that. But it was a rough go for me, let's just say. And, I appreciate though I never would have read that author if not for the person who picked it. And again, thank you for supporting my channel by getting that. And I hope that you find some humor at least in the things I said, because like I said, I kept it light in my commentary and tried to be funny while I was reading it, but when I talk about it, I'm like, I don't get it. And this book having like a 4.4 on Goodreads is, y'all, people are lying, okay? People are lying. Moving on. Then I read a fan fiction. Yes, I read a fan fiction on my list of 20 fan fictions I was going to try to read this year, and I've read 3 of them. Go me. But I read On Submission by Color Me Golden. Real easy to talk about. I gave this 4 stars. It was a 3.5 on the spice scale. And in this one, Severus Snape is actually a co-owner of a sex club. And he got into kink after like getting into therapy after the war and finding that it was a great way to exercise control. And he now co-owns this place with a lady. And I think it's someone that Hermione works with. They have talked about kink before, and she has done a lot of research, and she wants to see if it's something that could help her with some of like her anxiety and some of her trauma to actually be immersed in BDSM. And when she goes to a munch, which if you don't know, a munch is like a brunch where they talk about BDSM. There are different levels to them, but at the most basic, that's kind of like, it's like an informational meeting and like getting to know people and maybe meet someone you want to play with and everything. And when she goes there, she discovers that her former teacher is one of the co-owners. So then they go from there and she starts attending some of the classes he teaches because again, he's the co-owner. So he does do demonstrations, but he also teaches a lot of classes and she goes to a few. And then eventually she approaches him and asks if he would be her one-on-one, like that she could have him as like a sir. And he agrees. First it's platonic and then it leads into there being more than that. And I thought it was fun. This was a short one. I'll have a link to it down below. So that is all the books I can talk about. Like I said, I was going to bring up Noelle again, and I can't tell you what the thing is, but I'm going to put a link in the description to an email group you can sign up for. This will include Allie Hazelwood And I think Elizabeth Stevenson's going to be involved in it as well. And a few other authors are putting together a collab, which I can't explain what kind of collab it is. But if you go look at the Instagram, which I'll also link down below, you will see what type of authors are included and you might have an idea about it. But currently the thing is called After the End, what happens after the end. And again, maybe you can get a clue about what that means. But there's going to be a collab that is coming later this year. And so you'll want to sign up for that email list to get updates because it's going to be great. And the reason why I'm mentioning that is that the bit of work that Noelle is going to be putting in, which it will be under the Claire Ken name, but what she's going to be putting in, she just sent me to read through and do some content for it. And I'm so excited for y'all to get it. So definitely sign up for it if you like some of those authors that I mentioned, because they have something really fun that's going on. And of course, I'm super excited for Noelle because those are some great authors to be included in on. So it's going to be great. But anyway, I knew this one would be long. This is a supersized one. And also there was some intense discussions I had to get into for some of those because there was some rough reads that I've had in the last 2 weeks, but there's some great ones too. So thank you so much for watching, my friends. I hope you enjoy this. Remember, this coming week, I will be gone. There will still be videos coming up, but if you don't get a response to certain things or don't see me as much, it is because of that, though my patrons will be getting more updates there. So if you follow me there, you'll know what's going on. So thank you so much for watching, friends, and we'll see you next time. Bye.